Imagine growing up in a family where wealth isn't just a comfort, it's a way of life. Now imagine that same family turning on each other, fighting tooth and nail in a public courtroom over a $100 million fortune. This isn't a movie plot. It's the real-life story of the Henderson family, a saga of betrayal, secrets, and greed that unfolded under the harsh lights of the American legal system. The patriarch, Richard Henderson, was a self-made titan of industry. Starting with a single small factory, he built a manufacturing empire that spanned the nation. He was known for his sharp mind, his ruthless business tactics, and his deep love for his family, or so it seemed. He had 3 children: Robert, the ambitious eldest son, groomed from birth to take over the company; Eleanor, the brilliant but overlooked middle daughter; Michael, the youngest, a free spirit who wanted nothing to do with the family business. When Richard passed away at the age of 92, everyone expected a smooth transition. The will, they assumed, would be straightforward. Robert would get the company, and the rest of the assets would be divided. It couldn't have been more wrong. The day the will was read, the Henderson family legacy began to crumble. The will was a bombshell. Richard, in a final shocking twist, had left the bulk of his $100 million personal fortune in controlling shares of the company, not to Robert, but to a little-known environmental charity he'd been secretly supporting for years. His children were left with what they considered pocket change, a few million each, a pittance compared to the vast estate. The will also contained a clause, a single sentence that ignited the firestorm. "My children must prove they have learned the value of something other than money." Robert was furious. He had dedicated his entire life to the company, sacrificing personal relationships and his own dreams for his father's vision. He saw this as the ultimate betrayal. Eleanor, while initially surprised, saw an opportunity. She had always felt her father underestimated her business acumen. Michael was just confused, hurt that his father's last act was a riddle he didn't understand. The battle lines were drawn. Robert immediately hired a team of high-powered lawyers to contest the will. His argument was simple. His father was not of sound mind when he wrote it. He claimed the charity had exerted undue influence over his elderly father, manipulating him in his final years. He was determined to prove his father was senile, a man who had lost his legendary sharpness. The courtroom drama began, and it was uglier than anyone could have imagined. Robert's lawyers started digging into Richard's final years, painting a picture of a confused, isolated old man. They brought in witnesses, former nurses, disgruntled household staff who testified that Richard would often talk to himself or forget names. They presented medical records, highlighting minor cognitive lapses as proof of his incompetence. The media had a field day, splashing headlines like "Millionaire Moguls," "Madness across the tabloids." The Henderson name, once a symbol of success, was now synonymous with scandal. Eleanor, seeing Robert's aggressive tactics, made her own move. Instead of joining him, she filed her own lawsuit, but with a different angle. She didn't claim their father was incompetent. Instead, she argued that the will's vague clause about proving their value was legally unenforceable. She argued that a lifetime of family dynamics, unspoken promises, and her own contributions to the family's success should be considered. Her lawyers presented a different picture of Richard, not as a madman, but as a complex patriarch who often used emotional games to control his children. This is where the family's dirty laundry was aired for all to see. To prove her point, Eleanor's team brought up painful childhood memories. It detailed how Richard pitted the siblings against each other, fostering a competitive environment that was toxic. They revealed letters and emails showing Robert's cutthroat ambition, sometimes at the expense of his own siblings. They even brought Michael to the stand, who tearfully recounted how their father had belittled his artistic pursuits, constantly telling him he was a disappointment. The courtroom became a stage for decades of repressed resentment and pain. Robert's lawyers retaliated, accusing Eleanor of being a gold digger, someone who only cared about the family when there was money to be gained. The trial dragged on for months. What started as a legal dispute over a will had morphed into a psychological dissection of a dysfunctional family. Each day brought new, painful revelations. Friends of the family were forced to take sides. Business partners testified about Richard's complex personality. The charity, caught in the crossfire, had its own legal team defending Richard's wishes, presenting evidence of his long-standing secret philanthropy and his clear-minded passion for their cause. They showed photos of him visiting their projects, smiling, engaged, and looking anything but incompetent.
Ow.
The turning point came from an unexpected source. During a search of Richard's old office, a paralegal from the charity's legal team discovered a hidden safe. Inside wasn't more money, but a series of personal journals Richard had kept for over 30 years and a videotape. The judge allowed the journals to be entered as evidence. In his own handwriting, Richard detailed his growing disappointment with his children. He wrote about Robert's insatiable greed, his fear that his eldest son saw the company as a trophy, not a legacy. He wrote of Eleanor's intelligence, but also her bitterness and sense of entitlement. He lamented Michael's distance, wishing his youngest son would find purpose. He wasn't a man losing his mind. He was a father in despair. Then, they played the video. It was Richard recorded just 6 months before he passed away. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes clear and sharp. He spoke calmly. He explained his decision. He said he had given his children every material advantage, but had failed to give them character. The money, he said, had become a poison. "I am not taking anything from them," he said on the tape. "I am giving them a challenge. A chance to find themselves, to build something of their own, to learn that a person's worth is not measured by their bank account. This is my final gift, my final lesson." The courtroom was silent. Robert sat stunned, his face pale.
Eleanor wept quietly.
The video was undeniable proof of Richard's sound mind and clear intentions. It wasn't an act of senility or manipulation. It was a calculated, deliberate final act from a father trying to teach his children one last lesson from beyond the grave. In the end, the judge upheld the will. The charity received the $100 million fortune. The Henderson siblings were left with their smaller inheritances and the wreckage of their family relationships. All laid bare in public. The battle was over, but the war had left deep scars. Robert, publicly humiliated, retreated from the business world. Eleanor, perhaps taking her father's words to heart, used her inheritance to start a small consulting firm, finally building something of her own. And Michael, moved by his father's final message, traveled the world, using his art to connect with people, finally finding the purpose he had been searching for. The Henderson case became a landmark story in probate law, a cautionary tale about wealth, family, and the true meaning of inheritance. It showed that sometimes the greatest legacy a person can leave behind isn't money, but an opportunity for growth, even if it comes in the form of a painful public battle. The $100 million fortune was gone, but for the Henderson children, the true inheritance was just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world's most compelling stories. See you next time.